Boston Harbor, 1907. Salt wind presses against stone and glass. A night nurse counts 14 men. 14. At dawn there are 13. Bars unbent, bolts unmoved. The courtyard forgets to keep prints, as if the island prefers a clean conscience. What remains is a ledger line where a man used to be. They called him Patient 1127. We know him only by the things he feared and the way he vanished. Before we go any further, subscribe and tap the bell. Around here, we tell the stories most people would rather forget. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. These dark tales are scattered across every corner of America. Stay with me to the end. There's a single pencil line in a Bible that changes how this case feels. Names are altered. Some records conflict. What follows is pulled from city reports, newspaper clippings, and a handful of private letters. We will lay out what can be known and the best ideas for the gaps. Not all of those ideas lead back into the light. The asylum stood on an island at the lip of the harbor, the kind the fog selects and holds. Administrators called it Harbor View. Nurses, who tend to rename the places that use them up, called it the Hill. Brick stacked on granite, windows set like frowns. The building sat in a staggered line, a compromise between grand design and the cheaper, uglier truths of budgets. On paper, Harbor View believed in moral treatment, air, light, routine. In practice, coal dust lay in the seams and pipes gave the law of the place. Heat when they could, noise when they must. Under the wards, a web of tunnels pushed steam where it needed to go. They clanged like a patient hymn. By 1907, money had thinned. The panic had taken more than coin. It stripped the building of attention. Hinges squeaked longer than they should. Paint grew tired. The laundry ran past midnight. New orderlies learned to walk heel to toe. They were way. Children taught themselves in churches. Move without being seen. Listen for what you are not supposed to hear. On the male observation ward, the one with a view of the breakwater and the far-off smear of lighthouse, beds were bolted to the floor, 20 in a row. The mattresses smelled faintly of soap and something older soap could not erase. Men lay with their backs to one another, each on his own small island, weathered by storms no one could quite name. The ledger calls him Marcus Vale. It was not his name. Men arrived under borrowed names for all the reasons men borrow names: debts, pride, fear, the simple need to start again without anyone following. He came on a raw November afternoon, shoulders hunched under a wool coat that had seen better promises. A policeman signed the intake. A doctor's flourish dried too fast on the page, as if the ink was in a hurry to leave. Estimated age, 36. Occupation, bookbinder. If his hands told the truth, that part was right. Thumb rubbed thin by spines, linen thread clinging to a cuff like a habit that refused to be shaken. Religious affiliation, none declared. Nearest kin, a sister in Cambridge, unverified. Symptoms at admission, sleeplessness, persistent fear of the tunnels, which he described before anyone told him the building had any. An obsession with maps, the conviction that someone watched him through the pipes. He carried a satchel with a wool cap, 2 spools of thread, and a small Bible. Tucked inside, a folded paper. Not a map, exactly. A memory of a map. Lines drawn, erased, drawn again, until one corner wore thin. Along the margin, a sentence written, pressed, retraced, as if repetition could make it true. The water hums, but the door is dry. The admitting physician, call him Hartwell, called the drawing nervous fancy. The night nurse, call her Eleanor, looked once and said, "A map to nowhere," then put the Yelpied Bible among the valuables. The satchel went to a storeroom. The tag bore 4 numbers, 127. The admitting physician, call him Hartwell, called the drawing nervous fancy. The night nurse, call her Eleanor, looked once and said, "A map to nowhere," then put the Bible among the valuables. The satchel went to a storeroom. The tag bore 4 numbers, 127. For 2 days, he kept to himself. He ate carefully, as if food might contain instructions. He slept in grabs of minutes, checking the radiator the way a man checks a door he already locked. He spoke once that anyone wrote down, not to a person, but to his reflection in the window, when the glass had gone black enough to be a mirror. "If you can leave," he whispered, "leave." Then he turned away, as if he'd surprised himself with the thought. December 12th. Fog wrapped the island like a decision. The last ferry ran with a single lantern, and even that light had a nervous wobble. Hartwell was out. Eleanor started rounds with a pencil and a habit of making every gesture ordinary so as not to wake any part of a room that slept at the edges. Watchman Pike did what watchmen do, shook the bolts, touched the keys, wrote the hour. A porter named Keegan pushed a laundry cart that leaned left no matter how he coaxed it, humming a tune he'd brought from across the water, along with his stubbornness. 11:15. Eleanor counted 14 men. They breathed, turned, mumbled. 11:27 lay on his side, face to the wall, blanket neat to the shoulder. 11:40. Keegan swore quietly at a wheel that pinched. He dropped a sheet, picked it up, and told Pike later the corridor felt colder than it should in a building full of steam. 12:03. Pike wrote, checked ward locks, and shook each handle until the iron answered back. His keys slipped, kissed the floor, and came up jangling. He heard a tap from inside the wall where the corridor bent, and told himself it was the building setting its bones for the night. He wrote nothing about the tap. midnight. The boiler coughed, then steadied. Men shifted in their sleep, long rhythms interrupted by small sounds. Someone mumbled about the sea. 11:27 watched the seam where the radiator met the plaster, the place where paint had taken differently, as if it remembered another color. 12:57. A horn out in the fog sounded like someone clearing a throat in the next room. Eleanor warmed her hands on coffee and wrote, all quiet, 13 asleep, 1 wakeful. She did not write his number. She did not need to. 1:15. Pike walked the inner corridor and checked the brass latch on the laundry chute. Secure. 1:34. The electric light fluttered, got its balance back, decided to behave. 2:05. Keegan returned with the empty cart, the left wheel arguing, the frame rattling like cutlery in a drawer. He told himself he smelled rope and tar, the way the harbor smelled when it came inside, and later admitted he might have invented it. Eleanor opened the ward door a hand's width to tell him to hush. By habit, she counted the beds. 14 iron frames, 13 bodies. She counted again because the first time must be a trick. Bed 10, 11:27s, held a man with his face to the wall, blanket neat and high. 2 steps, a reach. 2 fingers on the place under a jaw where pulse should answer. The blanket loosened. The shape gave the way a shape gives when it isn't a body at all. The rolled mattress ticking, padded with a folded wool coat, arranged with the same patience a bookbinder uses to make cloth lie convincingly where it doesn't belong. Unbroken bars, transom too narrow for a boy, let alone a man. Bolts right where her key had left them, radiator giving heat in little sobs. And yet the room cooler than it ought to be. Alarms here are not bells or flares. They are a hand on a counter, and 4 words said plainly, he's gone, he's gone. Pike ran the way men raised in quiet places run, fast, heel to toe, choosing their noise. Doors answered to hands. Locks declared what they were. The men on the ward watched with the particular stillness of people who have learned not to poke at reality when it wobbles. One laughed, the wrong kind of laugh. One prayed. One folded into his blanket like hiding could undo a fact. They searched. Attic to basement, pantry to pharmacy. Pike unlocked the laundry chute and set his lamp down to look up and then down. Sheet iron all the way. Slick. A spider would have cursed it. Keegan opened the linen press. Empty, as it should be. Salvi from maintenance unlocked the gate to the steam tunnels. A narrow run under the wards, heat pressing from both sides. No one lasts 5 minutes down there, he said. He was wrong, in theory and in fact, but they did not test him that night. The basement throbbed, a sound under sound. The narrow corridor showed dust, old footprints, the neat dot of a mouse that understood the building better than anyone paid to tend it. 3:25. The courtyard, cinders, wind, the kind of cold that grits between your teeth. Fresh prints? None. A city man later suggested wind can smooth a yard the way a hand smooths a sheet. Eleanor, who knew the world 1 degree more precisely than he did, pointed out, quietly, because some people only hear quiet if you give it to them, that wind doesn't erase drag. No drag, either. Dawn thinned the dark. A gull screamed like metal torn wrong. That's when the first lie found paper. The superintendent, call him Ward, wrote, patient escaped through negligence of night staff, probable exit via service corridor. The words fit an outline everyone recognized. Blame the floor you can stand on. Blame the hands you can point to. When the Board of Charity arrived, he said it again. When the newspapers called, he shortened it to a headline word: negligence. Quick pause. What's your first theory? A trick of keys? A hidden panel? An inside job? Or something colder and wider than any of that? Drop your guess in the comments. I'm pinning the sharpest one. January. A room in the city where ink smells like rain that forgot itself. 4 men with papers, 2 women with ledgers, a stenographer with fast fingers. They called it a hearing. Hearings are where people tell the same event the ways they wish it had gone. Eleanor sat straight and told it as you've heard it. She did not cry. She did not apologize for bolts she knew were shot. The stenographer captured coughs and pauses and missed one smudge of pencil that might have mattered more than any of it. Keegan spoke about the cold where the corridor bent and the smell of rope that didn't belong inside. Pike said he didn't drop his keys, then admitted he sort of did, in the way men admit to small mistakes so no one looks for big ones. Ward frowned over his glasses like a man who has read the important words and none of the important people. Hartwell tossed 2 stones into the room. The ripples are still moving. First, 1127's admission might not have been lawful. He arrived with a policeman but without a magistrate's writ. I signed because a signature was required. I was told it would be corrected. Told by whom? He couldn't recall. A man can be brilliant at forgetting precisely what would trouble him. Second, 1127 spoke of a dry door that opened when the steam ran highest. He said, "When the water hums, the door is dry." I thought it was nonsense. Perhaps it was mechanical. Or perhaps it was language we refused to learn. The board thanked them and adjourned. The paper wrote, "Madman slips to sea, reforms urged." The ward added a knot. Her page to its ledger. The Bible went into a box in a room where paper goes to nap and wake up as dust. Theories sprout where emptiness sits too long. They're a kind of condensation. Cool surfaces beget them. Theory 1. The laundry. Clean, simple, almost satisfying. 1127 hides under wool in Keegan's cart, slips through the door when the latch stands open a breath, rides the dumbwaiter or takes a maintenance hatch, crosses the basement and leaves through a door that was supposed to be locked and happened not to be. It explains the quiet. It explains no footprints if he kept to the wall. It ignores a latch Pike checked at 1:15, and it trusts a dumbwaiter to be kinder than dumbwaiters are. Theory 2. The steam door. If you've lived in old buildings, you've met seams that pretend to be shadows. Plaster swells, lath dries, brick shifts like an old man rising from a chair. Heat wakes joints you'd swear were mortared shut. Behind a radiator, where paint gathers in a small lip, a panel can wait a long time to be discovered. The map in the Bible wasn't a map to everywhere, it was a map to that. Overlay the ward plan and the boiler lines just so, and a line kisses a line and becomes a path. A crawl space, too narrow to invite, wide enough to permit. If you timed the breadth of the building, if you believed the sentence you'd written in the margin with your own hand, you could wedge yourself through a place the rest of us would call no. Theory 3. The harbour. Ward's later memoir prefers a clean answer. 1127 made for the seawall and stepped off into black water. Tide running out, cold that teaches fast lessons, winter wool like stone once soaked. Bodies don't always come back when the water doesn't want to return them. It's tidy, it's grand, it's the kind of story men tell when they want the world to have big villains. But a man afraid of water's hum, choosing the water itself as priest and altar. Symmetry is tempting, temptations lie. Theory 4. The transfer. A nurse from another ward said she saw a man in a cap with shoulders like 1127's leave the island 3 nights before the disappearance under guard. 2 city men, coats turned up. Waverley, she said, meaning the asylum inland. No incoming log, no writ, no ferry noted a special run. She held her ground anyway. Paper can make a person belong in one place. Paper can make him belong nowhere. There's a 5th theory men tell to feel larger than their fear. It says, some people are better at leaving than staying. The world makes exceptions for them. It's always told as a joke. The laugh gets smaller the longer you repeat it. Months turned. The building tightened its grip. Keys doubled. Latches replaced with newer ones that squealed as if to declare their existence. The laundry chute got a bracket that sang if you touched it. Eleanor left by spring, married a bookkeeper who liked quiet, and woke at 1:34 for the rest of her life, listening for a sound she could not unhear. Pike stayed, learned to hold his keys so hard they left moons in his palm, and told younger men the best advice he never got: listen to the walls. If they sing, wait. If they're quiet, move. Hartwell wrote a clinical piece about delusion and observation. He left out maps. He left out doors. He died believing he had been faithful to his training, which is not the same as being faithful to the truth, though the two sometimes share a bench and nod politely. As for 1127, the city filed him eloped, then lost. The potter's field on Rainsford filled with markers that learned to bow under weather. None bore his ledger number. Harborview kept working. Boxes of miscellaneous effects accumulated and learned to expect no one. Pause with me here. If you've ever worked in an old building, the kind that clicks when it warms, sighs when it cools, tell me in the comments, what did you hear in the walls when the heat ran high? If you've seen a seam that wasn't, I want to know. These stories are a community of small details, and yours might be the one that makes the rest of this make more sense. Let's go back and slow down the last night until it tells us something it would prefer not to. Two details have weight the first time and more the third: the light flicker at 1:34, the cold that Keegan felt at the corridor bend. Electric lines then were temperamental. A brush of wire to wire at a junction will dim a room enough to make you lose a breath. If the panel behind the radiator depended on the metal of the radiator expanding a whisper to let the plaster lip give, then a surge in the boiler and a momentary wobble in the lights could coincide with a seam loosening. A second of permission might be all a prepared mind requires. As for the cold, hot buildings still make cold corners. Steam moves like a person in a hurry. It ignores edges, returns to them late, rushes past as an apology. The corridor bend that felt colder than the rest is where two pipes crossed without meaning to. Maintenance notes from that year mention banging at that elbow and a gasket they kept promising to replace. A man in a small crawl space could feel that floor like a guide. Turn where the air changes. Trust the ugly breaths. They point to space. Now, keys. Pike dropped his. He says they never left his hand. People who pick things up fast often forget the half-second between dropping and retrieval, the half-second where an eye goes to a sound and a hand follows the eye. If someone inside a wall needed a sound cover, that was the cover. If someone waited for a moment when the watchman's ears were full, that was the moment. The laundry theory fails because it needs too many kindnesses. The harbor theory requires a man to choose the worst possible friend. The transfer theory is too convenient, though convenience is the coin of bureaucracies. The steam door theory asks you to believe in three things: planning, timing, and a small body faith. Take the Bible map, the sentence he wrote: until the graphite tore paper, and the way he listened to metal like it had something to say, and those three start to look less like belief and more like arithmetic. There's a secondary question people who love the practical always ask: how did he learn the building well enough to draw even a wrong map? The answer is unromantic and sufficient. He was a bookbinder. The same mind that takes a pile of signatures and makes a spine learns a machine by its noise. He watched orderlies. He watched the way steam lagged on cold mornings and arrived too fast on warmer ones. He learned where the pipes stuttered and where they sang smooth. He measured with a finger on plaster the way he would measure cloth to a cover. The plans were not on paper, they were in his hands, and then they became small graphite lines he could hold without asking permission. Here's a thing most people ignore because it isn't dramatic. The hill had crawl spaces that led to walls that led to nothing. They were the leftover rooms of earlier plans. When money falls short, builders condense a dream into a cheaper dream, and they leave cavities in the difference. 1127 didn't need a hallway. He needed a pocket, a place to stop being countable for long enough that counting moved on without him. The hearing transcript has one more quiet mystery. On Eleanor's second day of testimony, the stenographer's page shows a smudge where a word should be, a small grey planet where a letter tried to be itself and failed. Researchers later held the paper to raking light and guessed letters: H, E, A, maybe T. Heat. Eleanor said something about behind the heat, then corrected herself to behind the bed and moved on. A mouth can lie kinder than a pen. Months passed. Harborview carried on with the weight of an unsolved thing folded into its day, the way a person folds a photograph into a book, near but out of view. Then the box, S in the records room, did what boxes do, multiplied. One was labelled, in a hand that never thought a stranger would read it, Misk. Inside, a chipped mug, a tag with a string cut clean rather than untied, the numbers are 927 written heavy enough to dent the cardboard, and the Bible with the cracked leather back. If you open to the inside cover, under the printed words presented to, there's the sentence you already know, the water hums, but the door is dry. And below it, fainter and almost ashamed to exist, if you are reading this, you already know. Third brick from the right, behind the heat. That line was not entered into evidence. It did not make the newspaper. It did not make Ward's memory on the page he later sold to a small press for the price of his conscience. It slept in a box until the box was moved from a room with a window to a room without one, and then back again when the building remade itself into something else entirely. Will a sentence written in pencil solve a disappearance? No. It will, however, teach you what kind of person you're looking for. Not a ghost, not a saint, just a man careful enough to write instructions only someone already looking would understand, and only in a place where chance might, just might, deliver them to the one person who had heard him say, leave. What became of him if he left? True stories hate endpoints, but I can give you a silhouette. In 1909, a boarding house on the inland line of the trolley listed a resident who came with his own tools and preferred to pay weekly in cash. His work, mending, shoes, books, hems. He warmed his hands over a stove before he started, even in summer, and he turned his head when the pipes hissed. He didn't drink. He learned the names of the children first and the names of their parents last. He took extra time with anything that had a spine. In 1911, a shop catalogued a sale of linen thread and a bone folder to a man who signed with 2 letters that could be a name or 2 initials hiding from a name. No one remembered him Stron, Gly, which is one way to survive a second life. Or he never left, and the building took him into itself the way a tree takes a nail. There is a story like that too. In 1918, when a maintenance crew cut into the north wall to run new pipe, they found a panel that did not belong. Behind it, a crawl space that went nowhere, brick, then earth, no bones, only the old dry air of a place that had always been small. One of the men, over a beer decades later, said, "You could wedge a man into it, getting him back out would be another business." They bricked it neat. Brick keeps secrets better than paper. There's a reason I keep repeating the pencil sentence. It's not magic. It is the architecture of intention. The water hums, but the door is dry. Put more plainly, when the building sings its hottest note, a seam goes quiet. That is your moment. That is your way through. It is a recipe an engineer could appreciate and a desperate man could enact. And there's a reason I keep returning to Eleanor. This channel is not kind to villains. We name them when we can, but it is good to name the other kind of courage too. The quiet one that counts and checks and raises an alarm in a voice that does not tremble. She did not fail that night. The building simply contained more rooms than anyone had paid for. If you're still with me, you are the sort of listener this channel was built for. Drop your theory below. Laundry, steam door, harbour, transfer, or something we didn't consider. If you've read records, if you've sat with blueprints, if you've lost sleep over a sentence, tell me which way you lean and why. I'll pin the most persuasive comment, and in a few days I'll respond with a follow-up note on anything newly uncovered. Where does that leave us? With a vanishing patient, a locked ward, and a small handful of human behaviors that explain more mysteries than any ghost ever could. Preparate. Iron timing, listening. Here is what I think happened. He arrived frightened, but his fear wasn't directionless. He mapped it. He turned it into lines. He waited for the building to teach him its breath. He noticed where plaster had swallowed a mistake. He listened for the hum that meant heat moving at its fullest. He read his own pencil line as a promise. He built himself small, physically yes, but more than that, he believed he could become a man the building would let pass. And then he left. Not to the water, not to another ledger, to some middle place where men who don't wish to be found go to finish their sentences. If I'm wrong, the harbour has him and will not give him back. If I'm right, there was a winter morning 2 towns inland when a man in a wool cap held his hands above a stove and waited for the pipes to hiss. They did, and he flinched, and then he smiled because it was only air and heat and not a language anymore. He went to work, he mended spines, he wrote nothing with his real name on it ever again. Patient 1127 is still missing. That sentence comforts the kind of people who like closed books, file it, catalogue it, slide it onto a shelf. But the island keeps men like that in its ribs. Names, numbers, breath, gone. What remains fits into the crease of a Bible and outlives everyone who first heard it. The water hums, but the door is dry. If this reached you, subscribe and tap the bell. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and tell me which theory you choose. Next time, we head west to a mining town where a locked trunk rewrote a family's history. Until then, keep a light on, and if the walls begin to hum, count your doors.